"How can we help him?" said Stephanie. "If everything I mend by day the widow tears apart at night. If it weren't for the widow, I could have had him in her chambers, not once, but 100 times, like it or not, the way I did that night in the castle of Malveigh." As they finished talking, they went into the princess's chambers. She was deeply involved in conversation with Widow Repose, and Stephanie could not talk to her. The emperor, knowing that the constable was there, thought that Trnt must be there too. So he had them summoned. As they had to hold council, the emperor said, "Let us go to Carmenice's chambers, and we will see how she is, because she has not felt well all day." The constable went first, then came the emperor and Trnt, and then everybody in the council who wished to go. They found the princess playing cards with the widow, withdrawn to a corner of the chamber. The emperor sat at her side, asking about her illness, and she quickly answered him, "Sire, as soon as I see your majesty, my illness suddenly disappears." Then she turned her eyes on Trnt and smiled. The emperor was very happy at Carmenice's words, and much more so when he saw her in such a good mood. They spoke of many things, and the princess answered everything Trnt said to her, because Widow Repose had advised her to be nice to Trnt. What the widow wanted was not for Trnt to return to his country, but to lose hope of having the princess, and for him to love the widow instead. That is why she spoke so wickedly to the princess. When it was nearly night, the emperor and all his men went to their chamber, and the next day the emperor expressed his regret that all the men had to leave for the camp. Trnt and his men got ready as quickly as they could. While Stephanie was talking with the princess that evening, she gave her the news about Trnt, and the princess quickly said to her, "Be quiet, Stephanie. Don't make me any angrier. All those who make appearances of love are not made exactly of gold." Stephanie tried to talk, but she would not let her. So 2 or 3 days went by, and the princess showed a smiling face to everyone, including Trnt, because she knew that soon they would have to leave, and to the emperor she said, "Sire, here's Trnt, your virtuous captain, who will shortly do to the sultan what he did to the Karmari and the king of Upper India, or what he did to the king of Egypt. If everyone in the world went into battle, he would certainly be the only one to win honor and lasting fame. And that is worthy of a singular prize, for he is a great warrior, and he has gone into battle with true courage." The emperor said, "Virtuous captain, I thank you for all the honors you have brought me, and I beg you to do the same from now on, or better, for this is the hope I place in you." When Trnt heard so many superfluous words, and saw that the princess had brought them on, almost in mockery, he could only utter, "Perhaps." Trnt wanted to go to his chambers, and he went down a staircase into a room where he found the high constable, Stephanie, and Plesmadrida in animated conversation. Trnt went to them and said, "My sisters, what are you talking about?" "My lord," answered Stephanie, "about how little love the princess is showing your lordship when you are about to leave. Now, more than ever, she should be showering you with love. Then, my lord, we talked about what will happen to me if you go away, because the empress said to me last night, 'Stephanie, you are in love.' I blushed and shamefully lowered my eyes. That was a sign of assent, since I was silent, because at first I didn't know what love was, except for that night at Malveigh. And if you leave, there will be little good fortune and a miserable gift of love for me, except for all the pain I'll have for company. Oh, poor me, that's the way I will be punished, because of your wrongdoing." "My lady," said Trnt, Didn't I tell you that the day we left I would beg the emperor, in the presence of the empress and the princess, to give his consent to this marriage? The constable will be here, and then we will hold your wedding." "And how will I get along," said Stephanie, "when you aren't here? There won't be any celebrations or dancing or festivities at all without your lordship here." "Who wants festivities at a wedding if there weren't any at the engagement?" said Trnt. "Leave the partying and merrymaking for the bed." While they were talking, the emperor came down with the Carmenisa. Trnt thought that this was a good time to tell the emperor, so he went over to the emperor, and in Carmenisa's presence he sank to one knee and humbly began the following plea. "With deep humility, I beg your majesty and the empress and the princess to hold the marriage of the maiden Stephanie of Macedonia to my singular brother, the Count of St. Angel, and the high constable of your highness, because marriages like these are the union of the deepest kind of love." The emperor replied, I'm going to delegate my power to my daughter here so that she can ask her mother's consent." And he left without another word, while the princess stayed behind with him. When Stephanie saw that the emperor had gone so quickly, she assumed that he did not approve of the marriage, and she left the princess, Trnt, the constable, and Placimadura, and went into a chamber alone and began to cry. Trnt took the princess's arm and went with the constable and Placimadura to the empress's chambers. There Trnt and the princess asked the empress to give her consent to this marriage, since the emperor had agreed, and she answered that she would be very happy to. They immediately called all the court to Stephanie's betrothal. They all gathered in the great hall, along with the cardinal, who had been summoned to marry them. Then they sent for the bride to come, and they found her still crying because she had heard no news until they came looking for her, and told her that the emperor and the others were waiting for her. The betrothal was celebrated with dances and a sumptuous feast. The emperor wanted the wedding to take place the following day so that Trnt's departure would not be delayed, and so it was done. Great celebrations were held with jousts and dances and gaiety, and everyone was happy except for poor, miserable Trnt. The night of the wedding, Placer de ma vida caught 5 little kittens and put them by the window where the bride was sleeping, and they meowed all night long. After Placer de ma vida had put the cats there, she went to the emperor's chambers and said to him, "My lord, come to the bride's chamber quickly. The constable must have hurt her terribly because I hear some loud cries. I am really afraid that he may have killed your dear niece, or at least hurt her badly. And since your majesty is such a close relative of hers, it's you who should go to her side." Placer de ma vida's words were so amusing that the emperor dressed again, and the two of them went to the doors of the bridal chamber and listened. When Placer de Vida saw that they were not talking, she quickly called out, "My lady, my bride, how is it that you aren't crying out or talking now? It must be because in that battle your pain, that pain that reaches down to your heels, that won't let you shout that delighted oh, and even greater haste are over. It's a great pleasure if you listen to what the maidens say. Since you're so quiet, that's a sign that you've finished the meal, bone and all. It will be bad for you if you don't do it again. The emperor is right here, listening for you to cry out because he's afraid you might be hurt." The emperor told her to be quiet, and not to say he was there. "I certainly will not," said Placer de Villa. "I want them to know that you're here." Then the bride began to cry out, and to say that he was hurting her, and for him to be still, and Placer de Villa said, "My lord, everything the bride is saying is a lie. Her words don't come from the heart. They sound false to me, and they're not to my liking." The emperor could not contain his laughter at Placer de Villa's delicious remarks. Then, when the bride heard them laughing so hard, she said, "Who put these wretched cats out there? Put them somewhere else, I beg you. They won't let me sleep." Placer de Villa replied, "That I certainly won't do. Didn't you know that I can get live kittens out of a dead cat?" "Oh, what a lively young lady," said the emperor. "How my heart is warmed by the things you say. I swear to you by the Almighty that if I didn't already have a wife, I would have no other girl but you." The empress had gone to the emperor's chamber, and found the doors closed, and no one there but that page, who told her that the emperor was at the door of the bridal chamber. Then she went there and found him with 4 maidens. Placer de Villa saw the empress coming, and before anyone could talk, she said, "Hope to die quickly, my lady. Listen to what my lord the emperor said to me, that if he didn't already have a wife, he would have no one but me, and since you're in my way, fall down dead right now, as quickly as you can." "Oh, you wicked child," said the empress. "Is this the sort of thing you say to me?" And turning to the emperor, "And you, blessed saint, what do you want another wife for? To give her taps instead of thrusts? Don't you know that no lady or maiden ever died from being tapped?" And joking, they went back to their chambers happily, and the empress and the maidens returned to theirs. The next day in the morning everyone was happy, and they highly honored the constable and the bride. They took them to the main church, where they heard mass with great honor. When they had read the scripture, the preacher mounted the pulpit and gave a solemn sermon. When the sermon and the mass was finished, they had the constable put on the clothing of the Duchy of Macedonia, and they displayed the flags of that duchy. On his head they put a crown made entirely of fine silver, and they crowned Stephanie in the same way. When these things were finished, they left the church, riding through the city with flags flying in the wind. The emperor, with all the ladies and all the grandees, dukes, counts, and marquises, and many others on horseback, rode around the entire city. Afterwards they all went outside the city to a beautiful meadow where there was a shining spring called Holy Spring. After the flags were blessed, they baptized the Duke and Duchess of the Kingdom of Macedonia by pouring perfumed water on their heads. The Duke went to the holy spring, and the Emperor took water from the spring and baptized him again, giving him the title of Duke of Macedonia. Then the trumpet sounded, and the heralds shouted, "This is the illustrious Duke of Macedonia, of the great lineage of Rocasalada." At that moment 300 knights with golden spurs came, and they all made a deep bow to the Emperor, and paid great honor to the Duke of Macedonia. And from this moment on he was no longer called Constable. These 300 knights separated into two groups. Each knight took the most beautiful lady, or the one that was most to his liking. They held them with the reins of the horses they were riding on, and each of them, in order, rode forward, first of those of the highest station and lineage, and then those who wished to joust. And when they met, one could tell the other to give up the lady they had, or he would have to joust with him, and the one who broke the other's lance first would take his lady. While the knights were engaged in these games, the emperor went to the city of Pera, where the celebrations was prepared. It was already past noon, and the knights had not yet returned. So the emperor went to the top of a high tower. He had a great horn blown that could be heard for more than a league away, and when the knights heard the horn, they all set out on the road to Pera. Then 300 other knights came out, dressed in the same color of garments, and they blocked the road. A very singular display of arms took place there, which greatly pleased the emperor. All the ladies and maidens who had been taken prisoner fled to the city and left the knights. The combat between the knights lasted more than 2 hours, as the emperor did not want to stop it. And when they had broken all their lances, they fought with swords. The emperor called for the trumpets to sound, and they all separated, each group to a different side. When the knights were separated, each sought out his lady, and they could not find them. Then they began to say that the other knights had taken them prisoner, and each of them complained to the empress and to the princess about the ladies they had lost. They answered that they knew nothing, and that they believed the other knights had them hidden. Then these knights, very furious, raised their swords and spurred towards the others, and they began to fight again. When it had gone on for a good spell, they saw the ladies on the palace wall. A trumpet sounded, and they all gathered together and attacked the palace mightily, and the women defended it. But the men outside broke in by force of their arms. When they were inside the great patio, they divided into two groups. Taking a king of arms, they sent him to the knights who had come most recently, demanding they leave, for they were each there to get back their lady, along with the ones they had won. They answered that they would not leave for anything in the world. They wanted their share of what was due to them, as they had placed themselves in such grave danger of death. After this they held combat on foot inside the palace, and it was a delicious sight to see, for some were falling here and others there. Others delivered marvelous blows with their axes, and whoever lost his axe could not fight again, nor could anyone whose body or hand touch the floor. They fought in such a way that it became a fight of 10 against 10. Then it was beautiful to see. Finally the emperor had them separated, and then they were all disarmed in the great hall, and there they dined. When it was a half an hour before sunset, they began to dance, and they held a long and pretty dance. They took the princess and all the ladies, and dancing, they went to the city of Constantinople. After the meal, Trnt gathered all those of his lineage, 35 knights and gentlemen who had come with him, or the Viscount of Branches. They went to kiss the foot and hand of the emperor, thanking him for the great kindness he had done them in giving his beautiful niece to Deiphobus for his bride. And after they had all thanked him, the emperor smiled and said, "Because of the great virtue I see in you, Trnt, I love you deeply, and I would not want anyone to marry a relative of mine if you were not of the lineage of Roskalara. I would have begged you to take Stephanie, my niece, as your wife, along with the Duchy of Macedonia, so that you would be more united with the crown of the Empire of Greece, and I would have given you many other things. At the time that I offered it, you did not want to be a count. Instead, you gave it to your relative. And now I would have given you the duchy, along with a lady who is a relative of mine, and you did not want that either. I don't know what you're waiting for. If you want me to give you my empire, don't count on it. I need it." Trnt replied, "The greatest glory I could have is to leave an inheritance to my relatives and friends. As an inheritance of my own, I want nothing more than a horse and arms, so your highness will have to work a great deal to make me rich." The old emperor was pleased by Trnt's words. Turning to his daughter, the emperor said, "I have never known a knight with such virtue as Trnt. If God gives me life, I will see him crowned a king."